If someone should ask, tell them you heard it on AM 1080 KSCO.
Listening to AM 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz. It is 512. If you want to join us, 831 is the area code. 479-1080. That's 479-1080 is the call-in number. 218-5726 with your text messages. DM at ksco.com with your emails. Be sure to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and at flight1080.net. Coming up next, we have a very special guest. Ryan Bell is joining us. He is with lifeaftergod.org. Ryan, are you there?
Yes, sir.
All right. I am excited to have you here because you are I've been listening to some of your podcasts, and I went to check you out at lifeaftergod.org and checked out your video there. You have some very interesting ways to look at things, and I want to share some of those views with our audience. So first of all, let me welcome you and thank you for joining us here on Flight 1080.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Okay, now lifeaftergod.org. Explain to us how you got started on this mission, because I would see that you took a year off, right? You took a year off from God?
Yeah, so I mean, we can go back as far as you want at some point, but I mean, to make the long story short here in the beginning, I was a clergy person, a member of the clergy. I was a Seventh-day Adventist pastor for 20 years and have several degrees in theology and pastoral ministry. And over the course of those years, just had, intellectual concerns about some of my beliefs that I had pushed to the side. And over time, I just decided I would take a break from all of it. So in 2014, I took a year. I'd quit my job as a pastor and took a year just to kind of explore the beliefs that I had had all my life, and beliefs that had evolved over time, but also that I had not seriously allowed those questions the breathing room that I think they deserved. So spent a year looking at all of that, and at the end of it, decided that I didn't believe in any of the gods that had been proposed thus far. So became an atheist, but also a humanist, someone who still cared very much about human beings and their well-being in the earth and the planet and relationships and all the rest. So I decided I would start a podcast really talking with and for people who had gone through a similar experience that to me, people that had left their faith, or at least left a certain version of their faith behind, and sort of emerged into a new understanding of themselves and the world and the divine, if they still had that kind of belief system. People are constantly undergoing these spiritual and religious metamorphosis and transitions, and I'm just always very curious about people's stories. And so it's pretty much story driven and a little bit of philosophy and theology.
When I talk to people who have changed their religious points of view, it's usually the person who was down on their luck and then managed to find God. But your story is kind of different, right? How long were you in religion? And first of all, what was the denomination?
Yeah, so I was Seventh-day Adventist all my life. Okay. I guess I was Methodist when my folks were Methodist when I was born. But by the time I was 7 or 8, my family had become Seventh-day Adventist, and that's really the only denomination that I remember. And then I was in it my whole life. I mean, from the time I was 6 or 7 until I was, 43. And the last 20 years of it, I was a pastor.
Wow, you were a pastor preaching the Word of God. You took a year off during 2014 to kind of take a look at what you believed, and obviously something made you change your mind. Maybe a few things. What were some of those things?
Yeah, so I mean, for those of your listeners who may not know what Seventh-day Adventists are, it's one of the many, I would, to be kind, like one of the very conservative Christian traditions within Christianity. Loosely, you could call them evangelicals. You might call them fundamentalists in some cases. So on the conservative side of things, right, believes that the Word of God is, if not word for word given by God, at least very, very important and to be obeyed at all costs and that sort of thing. So over time, I just encountered more and more challenges to my faith, some from science, some honestly just from the people that I encountered that didn't fit within the biblical framework that I had been taught. And so, for instance, in my upbringing in the church, it was still in the Seventh-day Adventist Church not allowed for women to be clergy, fully ordained clergy the way that men are. And obviously, as I grew and went through my education, I felt like women should have equal access to all of the jobs and privileges that men have. And yet the Bible, as understood by the Seventh-day Adventist Church, said no, women can't have those roles that are reserved exclusively for men. And so it was issues like that pushed me little by little to the margins of the church. And eventually one is on the margins so far that you wonder, am I in this thing at all? And I went through a period of time in 2013, just a little bit before the official year without God, as I called it, where I had some encounters with my boss, where we talked about whether I was really a member of the church anymore, whether I really qualified to be a pastor, and we concluded that I didn't.
Really? How did that conversation, how did that go down? Was it you that suggested it, or the pastor?
Well, it was sort of mutual. I mean, he would from time to time invite me into the office. And I say invite. I mean, he, insisted that I come in, and he would ask me questions about my beliefs and about the types of things my church was doing. So we were much more involved in ending homelessness. We were in Hollywood, California. My last church that I served was in Hollywood, California. Church is still there. And, we were concerned about ending homelessness, helping people to kind of make it through their everyday lives, more so than trying to convert people to become members of the church. And, the church denomination wanted me to grow the church the old-fashioned way, by telling people that they were going to be lost for eternity if they didn't come to Christ and confess their sins and join the church. So you might call it like a social gospel type of approach that we had, which was not smiled upon by my church leadership. And eventually, in my evolution as a person of faith, I came to believe that that gay and lesbian, bisexual, transgender people were loved by God just the same as anybody else, and the church said no, that's not acceptable, and they certainly can't be members, and even if they're members, they definitely can't have leadership responsibilities within the church as people who are violating God's will. So I went against all of those teachings by accepting members in my church that were LGBTQ, and that eventually was the issue that really pushed me out the other door.
I'm speaking with Ryan Bell. Again, lifeaftergod.org is the name of the website, right, Ryan?
Yes, thank you.
So they can find out more there. Lifeaftergod.org. Ryan, I'm kind of on this. I hate calling it a spiritual journey because that sounds so cliche and just so lame. But I've been pondering this more and more as I get older, and I am somewhat convinced that the reason I cannot follow a religion is because it doesn't conform with my ideas. And I'm not sure that that's the right way to look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a standard approach, right? Where we say, well, this offends me, but then the Christian would come back and say, well, it's not really about that. It's really about what God requires, and
Right.
sometimes the things that are required by God offends us, but that's not the point. And I think that as human beings, we have evolved to understand the basic frameworks of right and wrong. And of course, we'll, have arguments over the finer points of whether we think something is right and wrong. But our human evolution has said that when we cooperate with one another, when we respect each other's individual autonomy, when we, for instance, don't kill each other because we can't survive as a species if we go around killing each other, if we respect each other's boundaries, we thrive as people and we get along, and it goes better for everyone. And we learn what morality is over millennia of human interactions and cooperation and surviving together as a species. And I think we know in our conscience, in our minds, what we ought to do. And I think on some of the bigger things, I think people become even more moral than the Bible. So I think we outgrow, all of us, if we just want to talk about biblical religions or Christian biblical religions for the moment, we outgrow those teachings where we say, oh, well, women aren't capable or aren't qualified to be. We all know that women are equally qualified as men in all of these regards, and yet the Bible limits that. So we've already morally transcended the teachings of the Bible, and then we have to, what theologians do then is post facto, they go in and try to interpret the Bible in such a way that we say, well, actually what the Bible means is that women are equal, we just didn't understand the interpretation the right way, and we create theologies to explain how we can progress in this new way.
Right. It's kind of interesting that if you're looking for morals in the Bible, I think that you're going to be hard pressed to find a whole bunch of good morals. There's some really nasty stuff in the Bible.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you have, instructions in the Old Testament for sure of, disobedient children are to be stoned, like people aren't supposed to even touch a dead animal if it's of the unclean category. Like, it's just kind of bizarre things, and then even in the New Testament.
For instance, splashing of blood when they walk into these temples, it's just really weird. Or the smell of burnt flesh pleasing the nose of God. These are just really weird and bizarre things. And I'm not so sure that we couldn't have a good moral foundation without the Bible. I don't think the Bible is necessary at all.
Yeah, I mean, I tell people all the time, like, if I'm talking to a religious person, a person who thinks that the Bible is necessary or that God is necessary for a moral life, I always say to them, I learned morality the same way you did, which is by thinking about it, by asking myself the moral, ethical questions. And we ponder these difficult questions, and sometimes we come up with different answers. Some people think that drugs should be legalized. Other people think that drugs should be criminalized. And we can have arguments about the pros and cons of what should be allowed legally, this and that, immigration, various things. Those things are debatable, and we can talk about what's right and wrong. But in the end, when it comes to, physical violence, killing people, respecting each other's physical bodies, I think we all know what's right and what's wrong. We know that to steal something from someone is not right. We know that to rape someone is wrong. We know that
some people would say that instinct there, or that knowledge, is God acting through us. Some people would say that is God.
Yeah, I mean, you can call anything God. I mean, some people say God is love. And I say, well, I'd rather just call it love. It's less confusing that way.
479-1080 if you want to get on board. We're speaking with Ryan Bell of lifeaftergod.org. Okay, Ryan, so how has your life changed since you are not a religious person anymore? Is that accurate to say? You're not religious?
Yeah.
How has your view changed on, say, evolution? Do you believe that do you still believe in evolution? No? Or did you? Has that changed?
Yeah, so in the beginning, of course, I didn't believe in evolution. I believed that God had created the world in 6 literal days and then rested on the 7th day. And that was what my church taught me. That's what my pastors and my family taught me, I think with the best of intentions. And little by little, even in seminary, actually, in graduate school, I had a course in creationism. And it wasn't about science, really. It was more about philosophy. But I grew up believing that God created the world. And then through my own reading and exposure to different points of view, I came to believe that probably that the 99% of scientists were correct, that some version of a long evolution is the right way to understand how we came to be the people that we are today. And that was one of the things that got me in trouble with the church. I didn't explicitly teach evolution, but nor did I teach creationism. I sort of left that subject to the side. But when I was questioned about it by my church leadership, I confessed that I believed in a long evolution, and that was not compatible with my faith. And so that was one of the things that changed for me. But I had already started believing in evolution probably 7-8 years before I ended up leaving the church.
479-1080, DM at ksco.com. Ryan, do you mind taking phone calls?
No, not at all. That'd be great.
All right. Pete is going to be up first. He's calling from Santa Cruz. If you want to get on board, 831-479-1080 is the number. Pete, thank you for your call. You're in the air.
Hey, good afternoon. Interesting guest tonight. I just wanted to ask Ryan, so you said that you first got involved with the church when you were like 6. Is that correct?
Yeah, when I first became a part of the Seventh-day Adventist Church.
So I don't know how old you are now. You sound young to me. You sound like you're a youngster still, but not, obviously not that young. But don't you see this is the one problem I have with religion. I believe that everybody should be free to believe in whatever they want. And I just don't. I believe in what I believe in, and I don't. It's not my problem with what you believe or don't believe. But what I have a problem with, what really bothers me, I don't have a problem, but it bothers me in my gut, is when I see people teaching their young kids their different religion like it is life. Because it sounds like to me like you were taught this, and you never changed your mind. You're just continuing to learn, and you're questioning what you were taught. So like it seems like you were almost indoctrinated to the church. And I don't know if that's the right term or not, but does that make sense that you see like a lot of young kids, or you want to bring your kids up in the same faith you have, but why don't we let our kids decide their own? It's like we already decide for them when they're young, and then their whole life they're questioning it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think indoctrination is a perfectly fine word for it. And I think that's exactly what happened to me. And some people feel that this is a form of child abuse, that putting these kinds of prehistoric sort of non-rational, non-scientific beliefs onto people at that early young age is a kind of abuse.
Wow, would you call it that? Holy cow! I can't believe anybody would call it that. I am a non-believer in God. I mean, I just cannot believe. I want to, Ryan. I cannot think of anything more beautiful than to believe in God. And just what a beautiful thing. But I just cannot force myself to believe it. Is it child abuse to teach this to your kids? And is it brainwashing? I mean, indoctrination is a word. Brainwashing might be another word.
I think we have to take, Richard Dawkins famously says, that indoctrinating children is child abuse. Here's what I would say. In order to believe that it's child abuse, I have to believe that my parents abused me in that way. And I don't believe they did. And here's why. I don't think that they were giving me the best, which is what parents should do. The parents should give their children the very best of what they know. And the very best of what my parents knew at that time was to teach me about Jesus and about God and about the church and the Bible. So no, I don't believe. I believe it's possible for it to be child abuse. I think if you intentionally teach someone something that is harmful and they believe it deep in their core, that's abusive. It's a kind of brainwashing, mental manipulation. But most children receive that belief system with the best of intentions.
Well, but intentions kind of don't matter. I mean, if you're teaching your kid these fantasies, and I want to thank Pete for your phone call. If you're teaching your kid these fantasies that disconnect them from reality, then maybe you are abusing them. I mean, it doesn't matter how good your intentions are.
Yeah, that's true. And I think we do sometimes make too much of intentions. I mean, if I say something racist, it doesn't matter whether I meant for it to be racist or not. So I think it's true that intentions can't, that don't mean that much, but we can also only hold people accountable for what they know. Maybe we should hold them accountable for what they ought to know. And I do think some parents deliberately say, we got to propagate the church, we got to teach our kids. In fact, as a pastor, we were trained that if you teach children about God and the Bible and everything by the time before they're 6 or 7, they'll stick with the church longer. There was research to show that people that adopt the faith at these childhood ages, so that, we knew what we were doing. We knew that kids are more susceptible, and of course they are. They believe in fairies. They believe in fairy tales. They believe in Santa Claus. Ironically, I never taught my children about Santa Claus. I made sure they didn't ruin it for other kids. I told them to not go to school and tell everybody this, but I said, look, Santa Claus, here's what I told them. I said, Santa Claus is a story. Eventually, way back when, St. Nicholas was perhaps a real person, but he certainly doesn't fly through the sky on a magic sleigh, and he doesn't bring toys to people's houses. It doesn't make any sense. But it's a story that we tell each other about generosity and kindness and goodness. And as a story, it's kind of a fun story to tell. So we tell the story, but it's not real. And I think if people taught their kids about religion in that way, that, Sikhs believe this, and Buddhists believe this, and Hindus believe the Christians and Muslims, and these are all stories that we told each other over the millennia to help ourselves understand the world in times that we were in confusion.
Wouldn't that also be right, though, if you were teaching your kid their religion? I mean, wouldn't it also be right to say, hey, some people believe in evolution? Otherwise, I could see it being child abuse. I mean, that's kind of a stretch, but it is certainly not doing your child any favors by teaching them some cockamamie fantasies.
Right, it's true. I think child abuse is a very triggering kind of language to use,
right.
And so I probably wouldn't use those words,
right.
But it's definitely not healthy, as your caller suggested, I think, to teach people that.
479-1080. We're speaking with Ryan Bell of lifeaftergod.org. Be sure to check that out during the break. We're going to break for local news, traffic, and weather. Keep it tuned in. We're going to get to your phone calls on the other side. If you want to get in queue, it's 831-479-1080. When we get back from the other side, Ryan, I heard you talking on that on your website, and you mentioned that you suggested that science has saved more lives than God. And I want to talk with you a little bit about that on the other side, because that is right up my alley, man. That sounds like fun. 479-1080. We are going to break for headlines.
KSCO.
Eight 831-475-479-1080, I should say. That's 831-479-1080, 218-572-6 with your text messages, DM at ksco.com with your emails. We're being joined by Ryan Bell. He is from lifeaftergod.org. Be sure to check him out after the show, or even during the show. Check out that website, find videos and more information about Ryan. Now, Ryan grew up religious, took a year off, and how would you describe this journey, Ryan?
Well, it was, I think I started this 1-year exploration of my faith. I sometimes tell people that I started out kind of suspecting there probably was no God, but really wanting there to be, as you said before the break. It was everything I knew in my life. It was my family, my friends, my education, all of my networks, my ethical system. Everything was tied up in this. So it wasn't like I was looking to turn my life upside down, but I had really progressed as far as I could towards the progressive end of the Christian church, and I just felt like there was still more out there that I didn't fully appreciate. And so, yeah, I started that journey thinking like, okay, if there's a God, that's really important information. I need to know that. But I kind of feel like at the moment there isn't. So I really want to find out.
479-1080, let's head out to the phone lines. Rory is up next, calling from Watsonville. You're in the air, Rory.
Hey, guys. Yeah, I wanted to call about the indoctrination part. And I grew up in a Catholic household, and I forced to believe, but I believed, and I raised my kids in a Christian home, and I explained to each one of them that they have to decide for themselves. I lay it out as I see it, the truth, and then I tell them it's up to them. They're not forced to believe or forced not to believe. So there's a lot of freedom there, and I agree with your guest in the sense that, you know, you're up front with him. St. Nicholas was a bishop in northern Africa, or no, I'm sorry, was it Turkey, Asia Minor? Anyway, he was an early bishop in like the 300s, and they built up the Santa Claus myth around him, but he was a real guy that helped the poor and brought them gifts at the time when they celebrated Christ's birth. So I think you just have to be honest with your kids. If you're a believer, be honest. If you believe it's the truth, it's the key to life, of course you're going to tell them. And I have a background in science, and I don't lie to them. I tell them this is evolution. This is a theory of evolution, because it's still a theory, in case anybody was wondering. And then this is reality over here. This is what the evolutionists say. This is what in fact happens. And
well, can you prove your religious point of view is any more valid than the science or the theory of evolution? Is your idea any more believable?
You could say that you don't see species jumping or genera jumping across lines. Dogs don't become cats. Cats don't become dogs. So things stay within the guidelines, or the raceway or the lane, so to speak. And that's an evidence of special creation, in my opinion. I don't see evidence for evolution, Darwinian evolution. I see natural selection, but it's always within a species. You never see species jumping. And man can manipulate the genetic material, but that's not something that's happening in nature. The other thing is I can show them evidences of a worldwide flood. They're everywhere. The Grand Canyon, the submarine canyon right here in Monterey Bay, the whole Monterey Bay was carved out when the interior sea of California, the Great Central Valley, emptied here, not at the Golden Gate, because the Golden Gate was landlocked. Just look at the Monterey Bay. It came out at Moss Landing, where the Elkhorn Slough is an ancient river mouth.
Right. There's evidence of a flood. Ryan, how about biblical evidence? What about that?
Well, I mean, the biblical story is variously interpreted as well. I mean, I think there's some debate among scholars. Most academic scholars don't think that Noah's flood indicates a worldwide flood to begin with. It was more of a regional event, if there was any event at all. I know that I'm not an expert in science. This is not my background or my field. I don't think that the so-called evidence for the flood is as conclusive as some people like to believe. But even the biblical evidence isn't super clear. I mean, I think the idea of 8 people being saved on a boat with a bunch of animals is a little bit, a little far-fetched.
479-1080, 218-5726, DM at KSCO.com. Okay, so you were talking about one of the things I heard you mention was that you suggested, or somebody suggested, that science had saved more lives and does save more lives than God.
Well, if there's no God, then even one life saved by science is more,
Right.
And I think, what's unfortunate is that, we as Christians, when I was a Christian, and what often Christians do, will to give God credit for the good stuff, that they perceive in the world, and then don't want to credit God with any of the things that he doesn't do. So if God saved, supposedly saved my mom from cancer, my mom doesn't have cancer, but I'm just saying, like, if God saved my mom from cancer, so to say, then what about all the people he didn't save from cancer? Why my mom, and what evidence that she just didn't recover? Most atheists will turn to amputees as sort of the sort of classic litmus test for some kind of miraculous intervention, that these miraculous healings only happen in cases where you can't really prove it one way or the other. Whereas if someone grew back a limb, that would be pretty remarkable. We know that that's not currently the way the human body works. So yeah, science has progressed remarkably over the last several hundred years, and has cures for things that today we consider like the common cold. People would die of the common cold not too long ago, and so yeah, science has made remarkable advances, and it's an evidence-based system, trial and error, learning from mistakes, experimentation, and evidence, and that's I think where we need to place our confidence.
What bugged me about that statement or that idea is that it's kind of typical of a human to say, hey, we are the ones saving people with our science, and not give any credit to God. Whereas if there is a God, it is entirely thanks to him that we have the science. You understand? It's kind of like the horse pulling the cart pulling the horse.
Yeah, so if science is saving people, it's only because God gave people the ability to learn it and figure it out and all of that. I mean, sure, like it's a kind of special pleading, right? So if anything happens that's good, you just credit it to God, and that's great, But it's not falsifiable. You can't, if you claim that God saved you from a disease, what am I going to say? No, he didn't. There's really no evidence one way or the other. It's kind of this frustrating, non-falsifiable claim, and it's tough to really go down that road with anyone.
Going back to evolution, do you think that the humans are still evolving? You do believe in evolution now, right?
Sure. Yes, of course.
Do you think that the next step in evolution, going back to science, the next step in evolution is going to be the incorporation of science into the human body, augmented reality, augmented humans?
Certainly seems to be going that way. I mean, the thing about evolution, and your previous caller, I understand that perspective that he shared, and because it was a perspective that I held at one time too. And I'm not saying that I'm any more smarter or more mature than he is, but I'm just saying that was a view that I had. And I think what's hard for humans to grasp is the time scale required for evolution. It's beyond what our limited human minds can even grasp, the time between major evolutionary events, and even the evolution between various types of hominids. Is the time scales are just vast, and so it's very difficult to get our heads around how we could evolve from single cell organisms and that sort of thing. So I don't, if humans are going to evolve naturally by natural selection any more than we already have, it's going to take more of those long time scales, and I don't think humans have that kind of patience. I mean, we're experimenting on ourselves in ways that seem to indicate that, what you said is probably what is eventually going to be the case, which is that we will become some kind of hybrid between human and machine. And of course, the age-old philosophical question is, what's really the difference? I mean, if you have a non-biological entity that can feel emotions and rationalize and think things through and make decisions and respond to stimuli and all of the rest, then is that the same? Like what science will be capable of doing, I have no idea. This whole uploading our brains to the cloud and all of that, I can't even begin to imagine what that would require, and I'm certainly no scientist. So, but it does seem like the next phase of evolution is some kind of hybrid, artificial intelligence
479-1080. Let's head out to, let's pick up Juanita. Line 1, you're in the air, Juanita.
Okay, I have 3 comments. First of all, in the Bible, it says no. It doesn't say anywhere where we need a pope. Okay, that's one. And in the same line, number 1, the Bible also says that we shall not call anybody father, yet in the Catholic Church we refer to the priest as fathers. And then the church, number 2 would be the church, I think, personally, this is my opinion, is a business. Certain percentages go to the Vatican of the collections from the donations. And those donations are, the Vatican uses, I'm sure, part of it to defend the priests that molested those children. Now, the third one is there is proof about the Virgin Mary. The Virgin in Mexico, there's the Basilica of the Virgen de Guadalupe, and the portrait is there that appeared on the tila of Juan Diego, and that portrait has been analyzed by science, and it's proof. There isn't any paint on it if they can't figure out what kind of what was the image done with. There's no fibers in the material.
Are you talking about the Shroud of Turin?
Yes. Yeah, that's called the tila, yes.
Well, that's been called a fake by scientists now. Thank you for your phone call, Juanita. You're familiar with the Shroud of Turin, right?
Yeah, in fact, it was even in the news today, I believe.
Yeah, it was today, yes.
Yeah, there was something in the news. I was so interesting that she brought that up because I just noticed today this story saying that it's not genuine again. I think scientists have repeatedly said that it's not genuine. But it's interesting. I think your caller really illustrates the kind of context that we're in today. She's assembling her belief system in her own way. She has very strong beliefs about the Pope and some of the crimes that have been committed by the Catholic Church, which I very much agree with her about that. And then on this, she has a belief about the Shroud of Turin that is something that I don't share. So, people are not adopting wholesale one ideology like Catholicism from A to Z. They're picking and choosing the pieces that make sense to them, which is what I think I would expect people to do, to use their brains. And we may still have deep disagreements, but it just strikes me as very interesting that she has these strong views against the Catholic Church on the one hand, and then some pretty strong views about the Shroud, which I don't share those, certainly don't share those views.
479-1080-831 is the area code, 218-5726 with your text messages. That's 218-KSCO. Lifeaftergod.org is Ryan's website. Be sure to check that out. George is calling from Salinas. You're in the air, George.
Hello. Hey, this is a great topic. I love this. I want to talk about evolution. So you think, or creation and evolution. I got a lot. I could do this for an hour. So you believe that the universe created itself and all the laws that govern it perfectly? That's my first question.
Who are you asking, Ryan?
I'm asking Ryan. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna. It's interesting that this topic always goes back to first causes. It always goes all the way back. And
isn't that what it's about, though?
Sure.
Ultimately?
Yeah, where did the universe come from? did the universe emerge out of another universe as like a spin-off, kind of a multiverse kind of theory? The Big Bang, what came just before the Big Bang, that banged it, that made it bang?
I don't know. Say that there was a Big Bang, right? That everything came from nothing. Before the Big Bang, there was nothing, zero matter at all. That's what science tells us now, right? Currently. So from absolutely nothing, everything, the billions and billions of galaxies that are out there. Also, let me just say that they are operating like billions of perfectly timed Swiss watches. So from nothing came everything, and from an explosion came perfect order. Where can we see that exhibited in science anywhere else, ever?
Well, yeah. So I think there's, and this is to my feeble mind, to my non-scientific mind, I think there's two ways to come at this. Either that the universe was created to be perfectly the way it is, or the world that we see in front of us today is the one that can emerge from the universe that we have. And I think it's no more, there's no more reason to assume that it was created this way than to assume that this is the universe that we can have, or this is the world and the physical constants that we can have given the universe that we have. Like, I don't think there were any promises that this is the world and the life that we would have. In fact, that's what makes it so remarkable that we're here at all.
Okay.
It seems so improbable.
Okay, so you don't really have an answer for that, and that's understandable, because that's really an unanswerable question using
Yeah,
science.
it really is.
Okay,
nobody knows.
Let's move on to creation just for a real quick second here, because I know you got to move on. So, I'm sorry, evolution. So over millions and millions of years, we evolved from pond scum or whatever into these intelligent beings that we are today. So without going into lots of detail, with all of the millions of years of evolution, it takes, according to science, according to you right now, it takes millions of years for something to transition from one creature to another creature, right? If that is the case, there would be countless transitional creatures between animal A and animal B. Where are all of those? I mean, there would be more of those than there are species today. There would be more transitional creatures than there are end products, I guess, beginning and end. So if a dinosaur came from a bird, or a bird turned into a dinosaur or whatever, there would be millions of transitional creatures in there. Where are they, and how come we haven't found those?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that I've learned along the way is that we really have basically very, very few fossils. Like a fossil is an extremely rare thing to find, and so we certainly don't have a complete, biological fossil record, and there are holes in it. So yeah, I don't think it's reasonable to expect that we would find even most of the various types of animals that have lived in history. So I don't know, but I also don't think that my reaction is to say, I don't know, but it doesn't make sense to me to assume that God did it just because I don't know where those transitional animals are.
Yes.
My impulse would be to look for them, to keep looking for them, and the more we look for them, the more we find certain things that piece this very fragile puzzle together. So it's like having this giant puzzle, and we have, it's a 10,000 piece puzzle, and we have maybe, 1,000 of the 10,000 pieces, or I don't know, the proportions are probably way off, but we have fewer pieces than we would like, and we just keep looking for them. But I think to default into, well, God did it, to me is unsatisfying, much more unsatisfying than the not having all the evidence that I'd like.
Thank you for your call, George. 479-1080. I am with you, Ryan, man. I say they're a bunch of quitters. I say it's the easy way out to say, well, you just chalk it up to God. God is mysterious. He works in mysterious ways. What a bunch of just quitterness. I mean, what are you talking about, man? No, we want answers, and that's what makes us humans. We are so curious. Look, check out this text message, which I want to talk about on the other side. If God does exist, what was his or her reason for taking so long to give humans the ability to further science and help out humanity? And I really, really want to talk about that. I love that question. 479-1080 as well.
This is KSCO, Santa Cruz, Monterey, Salinas.
Four 479-1080. You're listening to Flight 1080 KSCO Santa Cruz. Ryan Bell is joining us. LifeAfterGod.org is the website. Be sure to go there, check it out, hear more from Ryan, hear more about his life experience. Now, Ryan, I have to say, you're not familiar with this show, most likely, but I do have more respect for somebody like you whose opinion has changed. whose opinion has changed. Now, you were brought up religious, and somehow, some way, you weighed the facts and came to the conclusion that there is no God. And for me, that is worthy of respect. I think a lot of people are raised religious and don't give much thought as to whether or not this is true, and they just kind of accept what they're taught. And I think that's very intellectually lazy.
Yeah, I mean, I think we do this in a lot of ways, and I sometimes wonder if it's a calculus that people engage in around comfort versus curiosity, and I get it, right? Like, I don't think that there's a lot going on in the world, and we're lucky just to make enough money to pay our bills these days. So I get it that, you know, some of these deeper questions, if we don't need to unsettle ourselves with them, maybe they can wait for next year or 5 years from now, or maybe never, because the story of God and the afterlife and all the rest, you know, you said it yourself, like, it's a beautiful story. It would be great if it were true. And if I don't have to unsettle myself with the idea that it may not be true, maybe I can avoid that. And maybe it's a kind of self-delusion or self-comforting or whatever. But I do get why people don't go there. It's just easier with your family and your social network to stick to what you have always believed. But I just never was able to think that way. I'm just more... I really want to know what's true. You know, I really want to know what's real as best I can. And I don't think any of us can fully know all the things that are true and real, but I have got to try.
Now, some of the things you mentioned that really helped you to change your mind were some of your views on the way the church treated people such as women or people of an alternative lifestyle, right? The LGBT community. These were the way the church treated these people were some of the things that made you change your mind, correct?
Yes, that's true.
Okay, now, is it possible, this is what I think about myself. I think that even if there is a God, I am unwilling to accept him because he doesn't fit into my beliefs. And that is, again, so human and so just typical, right? We think that we would know better than God.
I mean, throughout history, you know, like the Greeks and the Romans, they just accepted that their gods were awful. You know, they were selfish, lustful, you know, philandering assholes. You know, am I allowed to say that? Sorry.
Sure.
So I think it's interesting, you know, when you come to the monotheistic religions, that we really want our God to be a nice guy, you know, a guy that loves everyone. And there are these spots in the Bible where it indicates that God loves everyone. But then there's these other areas of the Bible where, you know, God would burn people alive and throw them, you know, the earth opens and swallows them alive, and whole groups of people are damned to hell. And it's just, yeah, it's not the kind of, it's almost like, if you kind of almost hope there isn't this God. You know, we'd all be better off if he doesn't exist, you know. But I was open to the fact, the possibility that this awful God existed. I mean, maybe that is the answer, right? Maybe there is a God and he's just a real jerk. And but fortunately I don't see evidence for that either.
479-1080, 218-5726, DM at ksco.com. Here's a question. What happens to the extremely isolated or nomadic people that have never heard of Jesus Christ or God? When they pass on, is it eternal damnation, or do they get a pass? I guess according to you, you're just, worm food, right, once you pass away?
Yeah, everybody's going to the same place. I mean, we live and then we die and we make room for other people to live. You know, we were told by religion that we got to live forever, and that's never, in my view, that's never been true. But when you've been promised this, it's really disappointing to find out that it isn't true. I also think, to the writer's point, that, you know, this is a very capricious God who would, based on some privilege, accept some and damn others. You know, it's not fair. And so there are a number of Christian theologies which do allow for people who don't know the story of the gospel to be saved. So there's, of course, for every problem, there's a Christian workaround for it. That's what theologians do, is figure out those workarounds. But yeah, I think we're all doomed to non-existence, just like we didn't exist before we were born.
Now, going back to where we originated from, I find it interesting. That's where I have to allow for the possibility of God. Do you allow for the possibility of God still?
Sure. I mean, I would allow for the possibility of a great many things that I don't yet know or understand. I mean, it's that category of knowledge which is most tricky, which is the things that we don't know, like that we don't even know what's out there yet to be known, and so we remain open. And I think this is what it means to be curious. I mean, the same curiosity that led me away from my childhood faith also leads me to be open to new discoveries. I don't know. I can't really articulate what that God would be that would make me believe in it, but I suppose, yeah, there's plenty of things I haven't thought of that could be, I suppose, true.
Doesn't it seem like almost religion wants to keep us back from scientific advances? When you start to ask hard questions, they always say, well, God works in mysterious ways, right? Just forget about it. Don't ask those questions. It's almost like they don't want science to address religion.
Especially written religions, or like religions of the book, Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, because these are more or less static. I mean, you have what's written down, and then you either have to accept what's written or you have to explain it away with, complicated theories. So, yeah, the more that science discovers, if it's not in harmony with what's been written, then you have a conflict. And so, yeah, the more that's discovered by science, the more the Christians struggle to explain. And I think what you were talking about before, about the ongoing evolution of the human species and the eventuality of artificial intelligence, the Christian faith doesn't allow for that either. I mean, right. I think we would say, Christians would say, human is human and machine is machine, and this is not in God's plan. But what if it happens? Then what?
Well, I think it's clearly in God's plan. If there is a God, you have to accept that this is all part of his plan, right?
Well, looking back, you have to accept that everything is part of God's plan, if there is a plan. I mean, this is the great, like, everything is clear in retrospect. Like this is basically how I came to my understanding about gay and lesbian folks is I was taught that this is a sort of an orientation that's unacceptable to God. Certainly the behavior of acting on your interests in another person of the same sex is not in God's plan. And yet here they are. Here are people, lovely people, wonderful people who are attracted to people of the same gender. And I have to deal with that fact. I have to deal with the fact that gay and lesbian people are real, and they're there in front of me, and they're not pretending. They're just actually that way. And so then I have to work it in to my belief system that, okay, somehow the way I understood the Bible before, it wasn't the right way, that God actually does love them. And, so it's always this post facto adjustment that we're making. And I ask people, what's more likely, that the Bible's just wrong about gays and lesbians, or that we just now finally discovered what the Bible really, really means? It's just much more likely that the Bible was written 2,000 years ago and had no clue about any of this.
Well, it is even, I think, more likely that it was written 2,000 years ago as kind of a moral guidebook, because if everybody participated in that lifestyle, there would be no recreation, right? So it is about promoting more people and promoting more religious followers.
Yeah, probably there is some self-preservation aspects to the belief system, and of course a lot of superstitions, a lot of fear, and all of that. And you're right. I think the Bible is not an attempt at the truth as we understand, like factual truth today. The Bible was written as a polemic. It was written as an argument against people of other beliefs. Mm-hmm. Even the creation story was written at a time when there were many creation stories going around claiming where we came from. And the Hebrew creation story was one of many, and it was competing in a marketplace of ideas about origins, and that was the Jewish take on it, and it wasn't designed to say literally what happened on day one and literally what happened on day two. It was written as an argument against the other Babylonian and other creation narratives that were common in the day.
479-1080, let's see what Judith has to say. Judith, you're in the air.
Hi. Ryan, when you came on your announcement, when you announced, it sounded to me, you worded it, you got to listen back, Dave, he worded it like he hasn't found the right, he doesn't think...
Are you calling from a tunnel, Judith? Because I hear a loud echo.
Hey, is this better?
No.
See, I called you twice, so maybe I'm on your line twice, because I thought I got...
Oh, I don't know, but we'll have to take care of that. Thank you for your call. 479-1080, DM at ksco.com. Ryan, do you think that religion is kind of built for... is kind of derived from hopelessness, powerlessness? I think it is a grasp for power and maybe a way for us to believe that somehow there's a cosmic justice that will make things right in the afterlife that are not right here.
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think there's a long history, like going back, I'm talking now like the length of recorded human history and even before, of, trying to explain the unexplainable. At least at that time it was unexplainable, lack of knowledge. And so religion evolves as a kind of way to keep people in line, to foster social cohesion, tribal in-group solidarity, out-group hostility. God will protect our group against the invading other group. Crop yields and weather patterns and all sorts of things that, if we do the right incantation and we say the right prayer and make the right sacrifices, that things will go well, and not yet understanding as humans that there were other types of observable patterns to these things. And so I don't think it comes from a bad place. I think it comes from an evolutionarily understandable history. And then hopefully we outgrow those things. I mean, hopefully we say, we understand the seasons are on a very predictable cycle. We don't need to sacrifice a virgin to make the sun come up again. We understand the sun comes up on a regular pattern. We understand the way the planets move through the universe and through space. And yet we still have clung to some of these promises because they are such lovely promises. That will live forever, and that the rights will be wrong, the wrongs will be righted, and it's a beautiful vision. It's the thing I miss the most, actually, is this sort of grand story in which the wrongs of the world are brought to right in the end.
479-1080. Judith is calling back. Let's see if we have a better connection there. Judith, you're in the air.
Hi, is this better?
Much better.
Oh, God. So, hi, I don't know how much time I have, and I don't mean to call to promote someone else, but there's another guy who did what you did. He left his church, and he's written all these books, and I just wanted to share because he believes that the New Testament was put in the wrong order, because he talks about how the New Testament was vetted by two one-world governments, the Roman and the British Empire, and he further contends that Paul the Apostle co-opted the original message of the Yeshua movement, because there was no J back then. There was no J, and warped it into a fear and control matrix. And he's got a lot of books on Amazon.com, but I haven't gotten them because they're all on Kindle, and I guess I'll have to go with it. But he's so many books that his name is Jeffrey Daugherty, or you could go after the Christian Whistleblower.
Okay, thank you for your call, Judith. Did that make sense, Ryan?
I think people are always looking for some problems there. And I mean, those problems exist, certainly. The New Testament isn't what people think. I mean, the Bible itself was compiled by people. And the thing that makes me interested and curious is why people, when they make that discovery that the Bible isn't what we've all been taught it is by religious authorities, why we don't give it up altogether, why we come up with some other kind of crazy theory about how we can understand it correctly, instead of just saying, no, it was the writings of people who had limited understanding of the world at the time and had motivated reasons for writing it. And it is what it is. It's like, we don't base our life off of Beowulf, Beowulf just is a poem, an epic poem that was written, and it's interesting, and people who want to study that, study it, and we can have an artistic appreciation of it, but we don't go out and create worship centers around Beowulf. It's just, it's a different kind of like approach to a written document. And when we find out that it's a fraud or that it's overinflated in its importance, I think we just leave it at that. Like, we don't try to, I would not encourage someone to try to come up with some clever way of, creating some new truth about it.
Hey, Ryan, is it any less creepy that when you see a Catholic praying and reading from the rosary and chanting, is that any less creepy than seeing, say, a Luciferian chanting at his altar? Because, when you watch a Catholic, they keep repeating it. To me, it creeps me out. It creeps me out. They keep saying, and they just keep chanting these things. It creeps me out, man. And I wonder, isn't that weird? I think it's weird. What do you think?
I mean, yeah, there is some sort of, I guess, some kind of trance effects that come from chanting. I mean, people from the Eastern religions chant. The thing that always creeped me out as a pastor, as a Christian, were the Pentecostals, who I was definitely not raised Pentecostal. And in one of those sort of weird twists that we do in Christianity, I really thought the Pentecostals were like, infected by the devil or whatever, and they would speak in tongues, and it just really bothered me. It really creeped me out. So that's the thing that really bugs me, and not bugs me, but just kind of made me kind of weird. I mean, I don't know what that's about for people entirely.
Yeah, it's weird. 479-1080. And, speaking in tongues, I would think would sound like a language rather than, some of the stuff that you hear, quote unquote, speaking in tongues is nothing more than just a bunch of gibberish and babbling, and is unimpressive and just kind of weird. 479-1080. Let's see who is up next. Let's head out to Santa Cruz and pick up Rob. You're in the air, Rob.
Hey, guys. Thanks for this great discussion. I think it's really cool. By the way, I host out in Santa Cruz on KSCO on Saturday night, so this is a subject near and dear to my heart. You were talking about the Bible and gay people, and for me, when I was coming out, and as a Christian, I had to go to the Bible to figure out why the Bible said what I felt inside me was bad. And as I went to each of those passages, I found in historical context, they meant many different things other than what kind of a flyby view of the Bible said they did. But it really came to a head for me years later when I'm an adoptive dad of 2 kids from foster care, and I went to find a school, and one of the good schools was a Christian one, and I went in and I was, full disclosure, I'm a gay dad with my kids, and how will they be treated here? And the guy said, well, your kids are welcome here. We're just going to tell them that yours is not God's plan for a family. And I didn't really respond at the time, but in retrospect, I thought about that and quite frankly prayed on it. And one thing I know beyond all, and I can't go through all the specifics of it, but I've had so many signs that my kids are supposed to be my kids. If there's one thing I know in my life that is God ordained, it is my children are meant to be my children. And I think back on that and think that's a bad thing on religion, that somebody could come back with that judgment on a stranger and tell them that their life isn't God's plan, when, in fact, for me, it is exactly that. But anyway, guys, I really appreciate your discussion today.
Thank you for your call, Rob. 479-1080, DM at ksco.com. Do we have 2 more minutes, Susan? We have 2 more minutes. Let's get another phone call in here before we have to move to the break. Let's go out. Let's see who's up first. Steve is calling from Capitola. You're in the air, Steve.
Hi, Dave. Great debate. I love Twin Lakes Church here in Aptos, and I just wanted to mention that Christianity is not a religion. Jesus hates religion. It was the Pharisees who had the rules and regulations, and he called them all polished tombs on the outside and dead on the inside. and you know what they did to him. And also the Pentecostal is, if you read the Bible and find out that it's a faith, not a religion, not invented by man, it traces one family from Adam and Eve all the way through King David to Jesus Christ, who saves us. And because we fell from grace in Garden of Eden, he's going to bring us home again. He does not hate homosexuals, and the Pentecostals in the Bible actually would talk and everybody could understand them, no matter where they were from. So that gibberish that the Pentecostal church is saying, that's not in the Bible either.
Thank you for your call, Steve. 479-1080. Let's try to squeeze one more in here. Joe is calling from Salinas. You're in the air, Joe.
Yeah, good afternoon. I was raised Catholic, and what we are told is that the biggest sin is to doubt. But I was very inquisitive, and I actually went to the Catholic seminary. I was sent by my family. I didn't choose. Anyway, around age 25, I started looking for books, trying to answer my questions that my mother would just say, God works in mysterious ways. And I ended up a non-believer. And I can paraphrase a lot of the things that your guests have said about the time of the when they wrote the Bible, who wrote it, for what reasons, compared to other religions, not just of the region, but of the world, and then compared to their culture. And the Jewish wrote in what we now call the Bible was nothing but their culture, kind of adopted to a faith of their own God, and that was only their religious history. It was not for the world. Not even Jesus Christ said anything that he came to save the world. He came to save the lost sheep of Israel. It was just what they believed at the time, with very poor understanding of the universe.
Thank you for your call, Joe. 479-1080. We are going to head out to a commercial break. If you want to find out more about Ryan, check out lifeaftergod.org. Hang in there, Ryan. We're going to be gone for about 5 minutes or so. We'll be back on the other side and wrap it up. Your calls are welcome at 831-479-1080. ASCO Santa Cruz, Flight 1080. 831-479-1080. That's the number to call in. We only have about 20 more minutes, so if you want to get on board, you better give us a call now. 831-479-1080, 218-5726 with your text messages, DM at ksco.com with your emails. Ryan Bell is joining us. Lifeaftergod.org is his website. Be sure to check that out tonight after the show's over. Find out more about Ryan and what's going on with him. So what is going on with you, Ryan? What are you working on now?
Well, I work at a really amazing nonprofit organization called Secular Student Alliance. And what we do is we resource and develop leadership capacity with college students mostly, but also high school students who are on campuses across the United States and don't really have any form of community because they're not religious. Most of the clubs on campuses are religious-based clubs, and our non-religious kids need that sort of community connection and ability to volunteer and do service projects and all the same stuff that our religious students want to do. So we have about 275 campus groups on universities and high schools across the country. And yeah, I get to work with these amazing students.
479-1080 again if you want to get on board with us. Ryan Bell is our guest. Ryan, do you think that where do you think the future of religion is headed? Do you think a lot more people are becoming more religious, less religious? What do you think?
Well, the evidence, the data shows that people are becoming more and more non-religious. What we don't yet know completely is what those non-religious people believe beyond not be sort of being disillusioned with traditional religion. So, 1 in 3 college-age students, younger millennials, 1 in 3 are non-religious. When they're asked what religion they are, they say none of the above.
Is that a good thing? I mean, don't we need religious people to lead our country, or can you be of good quality without being religious?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that we need fewer people with those religious biases running our country.
Yes.
I mean, I think they have to be able to, our future leaders need to be able to represent everyone, whether they're Muslim, Christian, Hindu, or none of the above, or atheists. So I think America is amazing because we traditionally aspire to being a place where people of all religions and no religion can coexist peacefully. Lately, in the last few years, I feel like we've gone backwards in that. And I think it's a constant tug of war in the United States. And so I'm really excited about future generation leaders being less religious and more tolerant of the diversity that is just reality in our world.
Do you think that as mankind expands its horizons and kind of moves out towards, eventually we're going to have to get off this planet, move probably to Mars, do you think, or the moon, do you think that we should leave religion down here? Do you think that if we had it to do all over again, that civilization would be better off without religion as being its basis?
Gosh, it's so hard to know the answer to that question. I mean, I think that religion has served some function of keeping, as we said earlier, kind of keeping people in a kind of check. And I don't know that we get to choose whether we leave religion. It's sort of something that, we do because we are conscious, we're aware of our mortality, and we're afraid to die. And so we tell stories about how we're not really going to die. And I don't think that's going to change. I mean, I don't think, dogs don't make up stories about the afterlife because they're not too worried about that, because they don't have that awareness of their imminent demise.
Right.
The minute you're aware that you're going to die, you start telling stories about how you can avoid that. And even scientists, even this drive for AI and scientific discovery is in some way a quest for immortality. And so whether we get there by religion or whether we get there through science, I think human beings are really uncomfortable with death. And I think if we colonize other planets and moons, we take that anxiety with us wherever we go. So I don't know that we have a choice about leaving it behind. My hope is that people would become more rational and more just accepting of their mortality and just say, look, I'm lucky to be here at all. Who do I think I am? I get to live forever. I mean, that's just really asking too much in my view.
479-1080. Dan is up next. He's calling from Salinas. You're in the air, Dan.
Oh, thank you. Dave, you're walking on a fine edge.
Uh-oh.
But I have a statement for your guest.
Okay.
It was an issue of him saying that humans wrote the Bible. And he's totally correct. Humans wrote the Bible. But if you look in the scripture, you'll see that holy men of God spake as they were moved by the Holy Spirit. That's how they wrote the scripture. Thank you. Bye.
All right, Dan. Thank you for that call. 479-1080. Anything you can get from that, Ryan?
I understand the theology behind that. I taught the same thing. I just don't. If that's the best God can do, then I feel justified in not paying attention. I mean, for a deity that has all that supposed power, he's a pretty bad communicator when you can't even get people to agree on even the most basic elements. I mean, there are thousands of different denominations because everyone who reads the Bible comes up with something different. And if it's so important that we all understand this book, then and God really cares that we understand it, then why can't he make it clearer what his wishes are? And I just think that ambiguity and that really crappy communication, to me, is evidence that it's just a bunch of people talking to each other over time. It's no different than all the various interpretations of World War II. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we have thousands of books written about that too, and everybody argues about the details, which is a good thing. But it's just, there's no consensus among it, and I don't think any sort of theory of inspiration is going to make it any better.
Do you resent being growing up religious? Do you feel like it was a waste of time?
There's a modicum of resentment that I harbor, I guess. I try not to focus on it because the resentment doesn't do any of us any good, and history is history. But I wish I had taken a different course academically. I wish I had more career options. You know, I'm in a pretty good spot at the moment, but I would have done my education quite differently had I come to these conclusions sooner. And I don't get to go back and live those years over again. So that's a kind of occasionally I indulge a bit of resentment or sadness over that. But in general, I think my experience as a pastor made me a better person. In general, I learned how to deal with all sorts of different types of people and build community between people, and I learned a lot of valuable skills as a pastor. So those things stay with me.
479-1080, 218-5726, dm@kseo.com. So you were a pastor for what, 20 years, you said?
Yeah, just about 19 if you count my education in there too. But yeah, graduate school and everything else included.
Let's head out to Happy Valley. Joe, thank you for your call. You're in the air.
Okay, this guy sounds like a bunch of kids that I knew that just blame their, religious upbringing on why they're so hurt. And I just want to say, if God was more in this world, and he is very real, our planet wouldn't be suffering so much problems that we've had lately. Like, I'm sorry that you don't feel God's love, but believe me, God's love's there for you if you want it. Bye-bye.
Thank you for your call, Joe. 479-1080, 218-5726. Want to respond to that, Ryan?
I mean, I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
God's love is there for me. I mean, he sounded a little upset, and, I get it. I'm sort of criticizing what he holds dear, and that makes people upset.
Are you criticizing it? I don't see it as criticism. I look at it as questioning these things that have been put to you and coming up with a decision. I don't see it as anything offensive.
Yeah, I'm basically telling you and your listeners what my experience has been, which I find to be the best way to approach these subjects, because people are very defensive. I mean, if you start attacking people's dearly held beliefs, then you're going to get a very negative reaction from people. If your family's done a certain thing this particular way for generations, and I come and tell you that's the wrong way to do it, you're going to get defensive and say this is a perfectly fine way to do it. So I think I get it. You start questioning people, but my doubts and my journey calls into question other people's beliefs. It makes them think, it makes them question, it makes them feel like maybe what I'm really trying to say is that they're wrong. And I'm not here to say that any one person is wrong or right about anything. I'm just saying this is what my experience is, and that people ought to look into it. And I really feel like there are as many people that believe in the world as there are, because they don't look into it more closely. If they looked into it more closely, they would see the problems. People have often said, you were a pastor, how could you be an atheist? And I often reply by saying, it was because I was a pastor. It was because I spent so much time looking into the text of the Bible and the history that I finally realized that I couldn't hold on to it anymore.
Wow, that is such a cool position to come from. I think it's amazing. Like I said, somebody who was raised that way, who takes some time to question themselves and what they believe. I have much more respect for their conclusion than somebody who was raised religious and never questioned anything. I mean, it's just intellectually lazy. I can't stand it.
When I started into this, there was quite a response, obviously, from the organized atheist community. There are a lot of atheist blogs, atheist podcasts, and everything. And the news of my decision to take this year to explore what I called Year Without God became viral, and I got a lot of feedback from people. And there were the usual percentage of jerks on both sides, but the lion's share of people, both on the Christian side and on the atheist side, said to me, you know, this is good, this is what people should do. And the atheist said, if you do this and you come out a Christian in the end, it's okay, you know, because at least you took the time to do it. And the Christians kind of said the same thing. They said, if you do this and you come out an atheist in the end, it's better that you at least did it. And I really appreciated that reaction, because that's really the spirit of what I'm encouraging everyone to do, which is, you know, I'm not trying to say that people need to come to my conclusion. My encouragement would simply be, whatever question is nagging you, don't hide from it. Just embrace that question and find out about it. So if for you it's some scientific thing, study into it some more. If it's a philosophical question, a theological question, a thing about prayer, or a thing about, I don't know, religious authority or Christian history, or, you know, why are there so many religions and all of the rest, and whatever question's on your mind, just explore it and don't be afraid of where it might lead you. As long as you're being intellectually honest and studying thoroughly, you can only become a bit more educated and nicer, I think, a better person.
And it's fun. I mean, I love to think about these questions, you know, read the Bible and read about these animals that maybe existed, maybe not, Noah's Ark. These are all fun things, but I end up coming to the conclusion that they are just fantasy or maybe exaggerations. But it is fun. It's fun.
It is. I agree.
479-1080. Colonel Terry is up next. You're in the air, Colonel Terry.
What is the name of your guest, David?
Ryan Bell is his name, sir. Ryan Bell, and the website is lifeaftergod.org.
Lifeaftergod.org. I will go to it tonight. I look forward to that. Lifeaftergod.org. And, you know, he's intelligent, and he's intellectually honest, and he's unafraid of reality. And what denomination were you, Ryan?
Seventh-day Adventist.
Oh. All right, thank you for the call, Colonel Terry. 479-1080, DM at ksco.com. Is there any one religion, I don't know if you're going to say anything, but that is like so absurd that it's laughable?
You know, I think Scientology strikes me, if you can even call it a religion. I mean, some people just think of it as a tax scam, but
right.
I think Scientology is so bizarre. But, you know, I had the privilege of being on Penn Jillette's podcast a time or two as I was going through this thing, and he said something that's always stuck with me as both really funny and really true, which is that the difference between a religion and a cult is about 2,000 years, or maybe less, you know. Mm-hmm. So things that seem really crazy to us often are the things that are the most recent. So when I started, one of the things actually that sort of led me to question my own belief system was the absurdity that I saw in other people's. So when I said, oh, you know, Scientologists believe that some alien, you know, planted this thing. I mean, and then I thought, well, I mean, Christians believe that God impregnated a teenager who had never had sex, and, you know, and that's Jesus, and he died for us. I mean, it sounds just as crazy. It's just that we're more used to that story because it's been around longer.
Yeah, that's what I think too. When I think of things like you mentioned Santa Claus. I mean, is that any more ridiculous or less ridiculous than the concept of God? I question these things. I'm just as likely to question myself and my beliefs as I am to question those of others.
Yeah, that's important. I mean, because I think it's easy to think that we've somehow now suddenly come to some enlightenment that we're above our biases and we don't really have biases anymore. And that's a dangerous place to be.
479-1080. Let's head out to Salinas. Pick up Kenny. You're in the air, Kenny.
Okay. Yes, Mr. Michaels, I want to ask your guest. I want my answer off the air, but does he hang out with any of these Seventh-day Adventists anymore? I mean, are they like his friends anymore after this, or has he cut off all contact? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I haven't cut off contact. I still have some friends that are part of the church. I would have to be honest and say most of my friends that associate with the Adventist church are probably of the much more progressive end of the church, but most of them cut off contact with me.
Really? Why would they do that?
I mean, I just think I'm a traitor. You know, I broke faith with them, and for one time I was invited to speak for a class at Loma Linda University, I think it was, and one of the teachers there, and it wasn't even about my faith, it was about some other topic, and when people above, heard that I was coming, they canceled my invitation. And same thing happened at Pacific Union College when one of the professors at Pacific Union College in the Napa Valley, another Adventist school, invited me to come speak to his students. The president intervened and uninvited me because they just don't want my thoughts, their students being exposed to my thoughts. I mean, those parents, for most part, send their students to an Adventist school to get an Adventist education, not to be questioned about their faith by some traitor. So,
Isn't that more proof that it's about power? I mean, it's all about power, numbers.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's about protecting your own, circling the wagons. I think if you can create that hermetically sealed worldview, there is a kind of internal coherence to it. If you accept a certain number of assumptions, kind of out the gate, which I find difficult to accept, but if you accept those assumptions, you can create a kind of coherent worldview in that space, and I think that's what they thrive on. They don't thrive on, really finding out.
218-5726 text message. I agree with you, Dave. I'm an atheist, but I loved taking theology classes in school. Religion is interesting and fun to talk about. And also, I'm reading the Bible. Very, very slow reader, Ryan, but I am reading the Bible. And one of the things I find most interesting is the origin of so many ceremonies and sayings and kind of things like that we use in culture when you have a biblical basis. They have biblical starting.
Sure. Yeah, and I think reading the Bible, one of the standing sort of jokes is that, the quickest way to become an atheist is to read the Bible. And I find that most serious atheists, people that have taken their quest seriously, know the Bible often much better than Christians do and can quote it and point to difficulties and problems and all the rest. So I encourage people to read the Bible. I think it's important to know it. And I also think, as you said, there's so many cultural references that if you're going to read literature, if you're going to understand what's going on in the world, you at least need to be familiar with the major movements of it.
Mm-hmm. I absolutely agree. Hey, Ryan, I want to thank you again for joining us. Ryan Bell, lifeaftergod.org. Any other places we can go to check you out?
You can check my Twitter is at Ryan J. Bell. And I'd love to have you follow me there. Also, our Twitter is Our Life After God for the podcast. And I'd love to have you follow us and check out what we're doing.
All right, Ryan. Thank you again for joining us here on Flight 1080. I wish you the best, and maybe we can do it again.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. That was Ryan Bell. Check him out. Check out his website, lifeaftergod.org. Check it out tonight. Listen to the podcast again. Listen to the